So we'll get the meeting started. Looks like we have everybody here except for the student representative. We'll start right off with A, communication items, and go to you, Matt.
All right, Mary, you want to start?
Sure can. Hey, everyone. Glad to see you're all here and safe in this tundra weather we have. Things are going really well at the elementary school. Kudos again to our students, staff, and families for making the latest and greatest transitions. Really work on behalf of the kids. Lots of hugs, lots of smiles. I don't even know. We're creating some new kind of normal, but I think we're going to come out stronger. And it's just fun to see the kids smiling and laughing more and enjoying each other's company. So thanks for all of your support through that. We recently had DARE graduation. It was virtual. It was streamed live. Officer Tony led and Mr. Wolf assisted. We had one classroom essay per homeroom. We sang and banged the drums with the DARE song, and then the diplomas were presented. We learned a few things along the way. For instance, make sure that all kiddos have the DARE music in front of them that are at home. Even though we in the classroom had the Facebook Live up on our phones, it wasn't casted correctly, or there was some glitch in getting it to work for families that were outside of school at the time. So we've got a couple things that we'd work on if we had to do it again. Hopefully we don't have to. However, at the same time, what a nice option for families that have to work and can't join us. You know, can we always offer that remote option? So that's wonderful. Super proud of the kids. We're currently in the planning stages of next year. So we're looking at preschool enrollment. Matt will maybe mention something about that. We have a meeting to plan kindergarten roundup coming up next Friday. At this point, we're thinking it'll probably be a mix of virtual and in person, just because a lot of the regulations haven't changed for us. We're looking at class sizes and staffing for next year. And we're looking at a lot of that data that we shared with you at the last meeting and talking about what our multi-tiered systems of support and intervention process can look like moving forward. So lots of things going on in our world these days. And let's remember what a big deal Valentine's Day is at the elementary level. So things are a little bit fun in our world these days. Do you have any questions? Okie dokie, let me know along the way if you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Dave's reffing right now, and so move on to Matt.
All right, good evening, everyone. General community ed programming still continues to be greatly affected, of course, from COVID. We continue to offer what we can. We're planning, most of our time is spent planning for summer and then for next year, especially with the new community center and all that. Fitness center, we're starting to get a little bit more traction again. We continue to lose members, due to the current restrictions, but we are gaining too, and usage is picking up. Live stream report, the next Talk of Paynesville live will be next Monday, the 22nd. We'll have local historian Brian Haynes as our in-studio guest. We also have a district live stream that night too at 6. Tonight, our winter sports broadcast seasons are going really well. Tonight we have a girls home game at 6, so I'll be putting out of here or at 7:15 in a little bit. We broadcast our first ever gymnastics meet, which was really fun. We got the internet connection from the assembly grounds the day before the broadcast, so everything worked out good. They're great to work with, and it's really nice that it was in their strategic plan to do it, and this just kind of bumped them, and they are coming off a really tough year revenue wise, so we really appreciate them putting the infrastructure in place. We've actually had almost 1,500 views on that gymnastics meet alone between Facebook Live and YouTube. So it's great for those girls because sometimes they get a little forgotten about. They're off campus. We brought in a commentator, which I'm a dad of a gymnast now, and I learned a ton just by having the commentator talk about, I don't know what the rules are, and we got a lot of feedback from that of people saying how they appreciated that. So yeah, we've got a great broadcast team this year. District communication report, the last Bulldog Bark was kind of a big hit with that facility tour video. And we're continuing to get more and more people on our community list. That I just had one today. Miranda had one call that wanted to be added to that some more list that for the Bulldog Bark. Community center planning, we're just, so excited about that. Actually, we're planning a year from this weekend to have a big community festival based out of the new PAC, out of the Paynesville Community Center. So we're already looking at partnering with the chamber and other groups and have cross-country skiing, do shuttles over to Killer Hill, have pickleball tournaments going on, volleyball tournaments, bounce house, carnival, things that no matter what the weather are, that we could have happen and really be a highlight of our new center. So we're planning up all kinds of things like that. We've got black light systems set up. We want to do black light volleyball tournaments. Friday nights after games, we want to do black light activities for like middle school kids and high school kids. Someday maybe do a big black light wrestling tournament. Those are kind of big. So we're really coming up with a lot of ideas and plans. So, any questions for me?
I have kind of a random question. I know there's been conversation about the naming of community center. I've just heard like things. Is there a name for it? Are we gonna continue to call it the community center? I mean, and that's, maybe we don't know yet.
Yeah, then that talks about branding. I know that's on our agenda tomorrow for the admin meeting.
Okay.
What we had originally thrown out is PAC, just the PACC, Paynesville Area Community Center. I did see the thread on Life in Paynesville too, just the concern that there's multiple community centers, right?
Right.
There's the Green Roof Area Center, the Community Center, which is the Paynesville Community Center, which is the food shelf.
Right.
So I guess you guys ultimately would decide, right, on what naming and that, but we had originally just kind of tossed around the PAC.
Okay.
Just because it's tough because it really is a community center and we sold it as that and we pushed it as that. And it's more than like a rec center, because you could go kind of the park or, park or whatever, rec center, but now with our CTE area and access to other community and enrichment things, so long story or short to your answer is I think it's good discussion to have now, right? Because I mean, maybe there's something we're missing that would still get us the idea of a community center, but wouldn't compete with that too, so something as a board to talk about at these two and think about, but we do need to, kind of start finalizing some things for branding and signage and that stuff, because August will be here before you know it, so.
It would seem like that's something we should get on pretty quick.
Yes.
Because as you're starting to already plan ahead, then everything is coordinated from here out. There should be something sooner than later.
We start talking about a sign on the front of the building or something too,
Right.
would that name be incorporated in the sign or
Right.
something to consider?
That's why as an admin group, we talked about, we like the idea of the pack just because, Bulldogs in a pack, and then you can say, I'm meeting you at the pack court 1, pack court 2, the
Yeah.
pack wrestling room. But we are sensitive to that, we don't want people to be confused either about community centers, but we feel that's gonna be the community center in the community, when you think about.
Especially recreational,
Exactly,
sort of recreational activity.
yeah,
But if it's called PAC, I think that's fine then, because that just.
And I think that's what most people would refer to it.
Right, they're not
gonna
They're not gonna
say-
refer to it as the Paynesville Area Community Center.
Right.
right.
So how long do we have to think about it? Can we just decide at a meeting coming up?
Yeah,
I'm,
you can have it at the end of the month if you want.
Let's get it on agenda.
yeah,
Because when I'm listening to this, we're already planning into the fall, and we were over here also. We should just get it in place.
Yeah,
So we can start calling it that, whatever it is, when you're doing,
Right.
facility tours and,
right,
Call it the PAC instead of community center.
yeah, exactly.
right, just start
Yeah.
calling it.
I mean,
Well,
ultimately, the board and you guys were all on it through the process. We sold it as a community center and we sold it as maximum community use,
Yeah.
student use. So I don't think no matter what we name it, it's not gonna go away from our mission of what
Right.
that is.
Oh, I like that.
I like that.
That works.
Yeah,
We just should just decide and be done.
yeah,
Agreed.
so.
And I like naming something personally for what it is,
Mhm.
so PAC makes sense. You're, instead of branding it something that has nothing.
Right, yeah.
So when we say PAC, what are exactly referring, because you mentioned the CT area, but what is PAC gonna be? Just the one building with 4 courts, or are we including?
My personal vision would be that entire north end, when you have the auditorium, it'd be the PAC auditorium, it would be the PAC CTE. It's kind of what I was thinking of that whole north. end
That's
of
what I
our
would do,
building.
because we talked about having the CTE stuff kind of open maybe for older people.
Oh, exactly, that's
And
a major
so
goal.
I think I'd name that whole area. I like it.
Yep, I agree.
But, you know, something for you guys to think about and get feedback from other people too. Maybe we're missing something that would be just as good, you know, or better too.
You said that would be inclusive of the auditorium, probably that, I mean.
I would
I
think
think
so.
if
I
you
would
take
think so.
anything to the north of the cafeteria,
I
Yeah.
would say too.
that's what that refers to.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I mean, even the competition gym, as far as I'm concerned, that would be
Part of,
considered part of that. All of this, that CTE remodel is considered part of that.
So there'd be PAC Theater, PAC CTE area, what do we call the place with basketball courts then?
We were thinking, PAC court 1, court 2, and just number those courts as originally what we were thinking of.
But it's more than those courts, it's the track, it's.
Yeah, but, yeah, PAC track, PAC court 1, PAC court 2,
Okay.
court 3, court 4, PAC wrestling
I just thought it
multi-purpose.
was so confusing that we,
Yeah, exactly, that's what we were trying, we had that same conversation of,
The pack house?
yeah, we were calling like the PAC, or like the wrestling room, multi-purpose room, we were thinking probably it's gonna be like PAC room 5, or, you know, whatever, just to try to make it as simple as, yep, you show up there, you're for a tournament, go to PAC 1, PAC 2, or whatever, so.
No,
Yeah.
makes sense.
and that's why it's not confused with the old wrestling room, new wrestling room, it's pack wrestling room.
Yeah, not high school gym, not,
Right.
you know what I mean, so,
It's just, I like that.
Yeah.
That seems a lot more clear.
And all you really did was added Paynesville area.
yeah,
We've been calling it community center forever, so it's not like
Exactly.
it's,
yep,
I think it's a really good idea.
so. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I'll say I was one of the 1,500 viewers in the gymnastics.
Oh, good.
And I was very entertained by that. I didn't get to watch the entire competition, but I wanted to make sure to watch it. I wanted to see how it was broadcast, and I thought it was done really well. And
Thanks.
again, yeah, the broadcasters and their announcing and description of what's going on was wonderful.
you had the split screen,
Yep.
so you could see.
So you see them all, yeah, it was just done really well for viewers' sake, I think.
And that was something I really wanted to do because as a parent, the week before we were in Morris, and you know, you understand when somebody's live streaming their event, you're gonna do your kids more, so you understand that, but they were on their kids even when their kids were just standing there and our kids were on the beam or they were on, like, it's like, please move the camera, because we weren't allowed to go to the meet and, you know, so we really wanted to push that, all right, we're gonna show, you know, both teams. We're not gonna talk about their team just because you
Right.
can't do both at the same time, so.
But at least they could watch their athlete. It was done
Yeah.
well.
It's also been nice that the band and choir concerts, that those are getting pushed out. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's been nice to see.
Which reminds me, Matt, we watched the basketball game on Friday and there were so many shots we didn't see because we're like, move the camera over, move it over.
Oh.
They were in the middle of the court.
Which game were you watching?
High school boys.
Okay, well, I know on the C squad, Ben just sets up his own and it's set, and you can't.
It
See the
kind
whole
of was
court.
drifting towards the middle a bunch and I thought, well, maybe they're not paying attention, but the action's down there. Go.
Was it our home one?
Was it our home
Was
one?
it a home one you were watching?
Yeah, it was the Paynesville Studios one, live.
No, but that's the thing. So that's the automatic camera. If you don't hear commentating,
There was no comment.
commercials and all that, that's not us producing it. We have a huddle camera because we just can't be at every event. So that's an automatic camera. That goes by motion is how that works.
Gotcha, so that's why if there's people in the middle, but the ball's down here, it would.
Yeah, I don't know what the algorithm is that how it works. For the most part, it usually works pretty well from what I've seen, but yeah, if you don't hear commentary, it's not our production.
There's no
Meaning our Paynesville, the Bulldog live stream. But that's the beauty of that camera is at least we can have every event in the high school gym gets to be
That's,
broadcast.
that's still what Paynesville, all that Paynesville had live streaming, because you go to Paynesville Studios. or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, exactly. So it is our district live stream. It just isn't our groups of students and the ones that we, that our program does, so.
You only have one set of equipment, correct? So like you can only do, like if there's a home basketball.
That's what I mean, if there's two events.
You only can do one.
Well, you can only
With
stream
commentary.
one, like on YouTube
With
Live.
commentary,
Yeah, that's why the girls, the gymnastics we
Right.
did on Facebook Live, and then we had a home game that we weren't producing, that the Huddle Cam was doing, was basketball going on when we were doing that. Now, our stuff is set up, but I can't manage and do every home
Right.
event. So we pick our 15 events that we do during the season, we sell our sponsorship, and those you're gonna get the replays, you're gonna get the extra. The rest is you're gonna get what you get from any other town when you look on their production, so, which I still think is pretty good.
Is that something like you would ever see turned into a class where you would have more students
Well, we
like
tried
running
that.
and managing that and getting the advertisements and,
We've had strike one with that. We've
Okay.
tried it and it was unsuccessful.
okay,
I don't think that conversation is dead by any means. I think that's something that we're gonna continue to talk about, but, yeah, we've made one attempt at it and it didn't go well.
I would love to see that. I think we can do so much more
Oh my
if it
gosh,
was in a curriculum and,
right.
but,
Cause then it could be all event, I mean, any type of event that.
Yeah.
I don't know, and we're eons ahead, I mean, even the conversation in some colleges, they don't even have this set up. I mean, I'm super impressed with what we have and are able to produce, whereas a lot of people are way behind us, even colleges, like
And-
P3,
and a
not,
lot of people just kinda got thrown into it too,
Right.
just cause boy,
Right.
all of a sudden, we gotta be doing this, cause you can't let fans in, so,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, and it's free.
Yep,
That's been very frustrating when I've gone to see other events and you have to pay, I'm not paying $10 a time to watch
right,
yeah,
something like that, so. it's-
yeah, and that's what's so great about our
Ours is
sponsors.
free and
I mean, our sponsors are just
Yeah.
have been amazing, so it really is a win-win. It's a job for the students. Our workers to get paid. So for our broadcasts, and there's expectations. One that didn't come, she no longer is on our team. So I mean, they're learning job skills, they're learning responsibility, so they're learning professionalism, so, yeah.
We really enjoyed the wrestling. We missed out on the wrestling this year so much, and
Oh, yeah.
the commentary is
Yeah,
wonderful.
doesn't Nick do a good job? Yeah.
It is wonderful, the camera work is
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And the way you put the scores up on the screen,
Yeah, we added a new scoreboard.
it's
this year.
unbelievable.
That's
The
awesome.
only problem is now when we have to watch some other school's live stream, we are so disappointed.
I know.
Yeah, everybody's trying their
You're
best.
doing a
and-
great job.
Yeah,
I
well,
love it.
thanks. They got a good team of people, so that's good. It's fun to do. Yeah. Good. Any other questions? No? Good, thank you.
I should note you guys, when Dave gets done prepping, he's gonna come back in and do his, interrupt us at some point in time, and then Max is coaching, so. This is Donnie.
All right. Good evening, everyone. A little construction update again. Being they got all the floors cemented now, they've brought in, they got lucky and there was a whole lot of block layers to be had this week so far. So I think they ended up with 6 more block layers than they expected, so they've been putting up block walls and throughout the areas, and the plumbing now for the bathrooms is in. They put that in this week. They plan on tiling the bathrooms the second week in March. And after that, by the end of March, they hope to put the fixtures in. Also, they'll be working on installing steel studs in the community head offices and stuff for getting the offices all squared up. The other thing, they got a whole lot of windows in, and they plan on putting windows in the north side of the field house. Getting them all in this coming week, I think. And the other project we've been working on is getting electrical and sinks in the coffee shop down at the student center. We've got door locks on now, and it's coming together. It's just of course, they tore out an old sink and the plumbing's too high and they gotta dig into the wall and drop the plumbing to make these sinks work, but otherwise it's looking good. Other than that, I have nothing else, I guess, but.
Got heat in the school?
Yeah. You know, it's actually been working real well. They, even got our oil up and running. They've got a few things to do with the boiler room, let's put it that way. And then we got a little more training coming up and should be good, but, yeah,
So I know I asked this before, but how are we doing temperature wise?
as far as,
Classrooms, do we have classrooms at 80 and 85 degrees and others at 70?
you know,
That was
I haven't got any complaints.
Well, that's a good sign.
Let's put it that way. This has been the first year, and especially as cold as it is right now, it really has been okay.
Good.
I shouldn't say that. I've been very a little cold this morning, but we up there, I guess. So. Other than that, it's, I think it's been good.
Thanks, Donnie.
Yep.
Thanks, Donnie.
Yep.
Item B, 21-22 budget development, Matt?
All right. Fun things to talk about too.
It's a budget.
Less fun, but, so this is just a preliminary conversation about, budget and the budgeting process we've started. The next step in this process will be that at the February, board meeting at the end of the month, the, admin team will bring a recommended amount that we believe that we should try to, reduce our expenditures. Typically, in the past, I think that amount that has been recommended, that's always been what we've moved forward with, and that's what it is. I am gonna ask the board for a little patience this year, because there are a lot of moving parts that typically aren't in play, okay? So I just wanna kind of go through the budget spreadsheet, so the spreadsheet that was attached to the agenda, now this is the revised February budget. And the important thing is after audited. So if you have the spreadsheet up, it's the beginning fund balance, that is the blue column on the left. Those amounts are there because that's what our auditor said when they come out in November, that the board approved in December. Those are the audited amounts that the auditor said this is what the district has for funds. Then what we did is the preliminary budget for 2021 revenue and 2021 expenditures. That's all based on the what ifs and the scenario as to how we develop a budget. Now, the difference with this is this budget has actually taken our enrollment MARS reporting that we submit to the state in October and November. Those are the two points in the year that the state does most of their funding based off of, is October 1 MARS submission, October 15th and November 1. So this has taken that data now and plugged it into the 2021 budget. So this is what our auditors said we have, plus now actually taking the student counts that are here, that are part of Paynesville Area School, to come up with what our revenue and expenditures look like. As you can see, and we talked about this, I believe it was in September, that we were down significantly with student enrollment. 38 students is what we were down. And so you could see that the projected budget deficit for the 2021 school year is $394,816. That is that general unassigned account. The rest of those amounts, those assigned accounts, while they are important, those are assigned in such a manner that you can't carry deficits forward with them. So when you look at ending fund balances, you would see in that far right-hand column, anything that has an assigned account, it either can go to zero or it has to be a positive number. So obviously that 394,816, a large chunk of that is attributed to our lower student enrollment. Couple things that are also still in the works with this is there is still conversation going on. I can't really gauge what level of urgency there is to the conversation, but there is some talk about actually having school districts use their 1920 student counts for their 2021 school budget. If you remember back in November when the budget forecast came out and there was a surplus, I forget the exact amount that the state had announced that there was a surplus. They specifically talked about this 15 or 16,000 fewer students in public education. That was a contributing factor to a large chunk of that surplus. And so from that point, there has been conversation about, since that money was budgeted, do we have our local districts use their 1920 numbers versus 2021? I believe it needs to have legislative action in order for that to happen. I don't know, and I haven't seen any bills or anything introduced that have gotten any traction or anything that would move us in that direction. Maggie?
So I have a question. So that November 1st or whatever that last point is, that's the last calculation for student enrollment for the entire academic year. So regardless if we have a big influx, if we can get all student back, hopefully students will come back then.
Partially, the answer to that is yes.
Okay,
So when we talk about categorical funding, so in Minnesota, for instance, there's small school categorical funds. So if you're a school with less than 1,000 kids, you get small school aid. There are transportation sparsity. There's a formula for that. There's compensatory funds. All of those that are a categorical funding stream, all totaled, I think there's like 22 of them in the state.
okay,
All of those categoricals, they all use enrollment from either October 1 or October 15th. And then they plug those numbers into the formula to come up with what your revenue is. So for any categorical funding, yes, okay? The other side of the conversation then is in Minnesota, the dollar follows the kid. So if we have a student who is enrolled for 51% of their academic year at Paynesville and 49% of their academic year at Minnewaska, Paynesville would get 51% of that student's state aid and Minnewaska would get 49%. So there's really two pieces to that question that
so
you're
a
asking.
fraction of it might,
Absolutely.
Come in.
As students re-enroll and
Okay.
come back, then yes, we are gonna start to gain membership hours from those students and we would get state aid that reflects the hours that they're enrolled with us.
okay,
The problem is, there's really nothing right now unless the legislature intervenes with what was going on with that categorical system
Okay.
from October 1st or October 15th Mars runs.
So if the legislature convenes or and gets involved and they say that we can use other funding, then that would increase that funding, making a lot of that 394 go away for this year's budget, or will that only affect next year?
Okay, so and then that becomes the other piece to this, is you're right, it is a 1-year stopgap, say, or it's a 1-year fix. But at the same time, I think what the legislators' conversation is really about is, yes, it's a 1-year fix, but at the same time now, districts right now know they have data for what their enrollment is right now. So now they can go and develop a budget for next year off of their enrollment that they have now. The problem is budgets were developed off of 1920 enrollments, and there was no formula that you could put out there to say, these are the mitigation strategies we're required to put in place, and say, districts, you should only expect 88% of your enrollments to return to campus in the fall. There was no metric out there to even use. So that's really the piece, the talking point that people are having right now is, yes, we understand it will help for 1 year, but at the same time, districts should have more data to be able to make better estimations as to how many students are gonna be in the building next year.
So we have to have next year's budget by July.
Yep, June
So we're
30th.
gonna end up using these numbers for next year's budget because we don't have an idea of the enrollment until we hit school
Correct,
in the fall.
correct,
So if everybody comes back, we would have some massive changes.
correct.
I got you. I'm on page.
Yep,
This is the opposite, right? I mean, this is a good thing.
Well, what Bruce was talking about potentially could be the upswing of it, but right now.
I mean, wouldn't it be better to count on this fewer students and then
That's what
price
next year.
more
That's what we
students,
have to
right?
do.
Correct, yes,
That's a good problem to have,
yes.
as opposed to,
As opposed to what we're experiencing right now.
right.
Yes, correct.
But as we go through next year, we're gonna have the enrollment numbers by November, when we have to do this again. We are going to make, potentially, if the students come back, we are going to make a favorable adjustment.
Right.
But we have to make decisions based off of this year's budget, which is the
Yeah,
super big challenge.
Right.
Knowing it may change, but we can't go into a budget
Correct.
deficit. That's the huge issue.
Correct.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, so the other thing is that districts can approve a deficit budget. There's nothing in state statute that says you can't approve a deficit budget on June 30th. The only issue becomes, once your fund balance is in such a place where it's either zero or actually negative 2.5% below zero, then you're in statutory operating debt, and then you have to put a plan together for the state and all that, and you don't want to go down that road.
But our fund balance with this is at what percent?
Well, right now, and that's the silver lining to this. Paynesville has done an excellent job managing resources. So the other thing that's going on is we do have a fund balance to be able to assist
Right.
with these turbulent times. And this is just another reason why it's important for districts to stay committed to having a fund balance. Exactly what we're going through now. Okay? So that's in a nutshell where things are at. And then you can see, these other things when you're looking at the bottom of this, you're gonna see there's a big red, $9 million deficit, $9,828,179. The reason that's a deficit is because of the construction project. So we took, and Steve Pumper explained this when he was here for Truth and Taxation. We took and sold bonds and took all the revenue in 1920. And now over 2021 and 21-22, we're gonna expend that revenue. So that number is gonna continue to look like, you might get questions, what's going on? Why would the district ever be okay with a $9 million deficit? It's because we collected the bond revenue and now over the next 2 years, we're gonna expend it. Okay? All right, so now let's look at some different enrollment scenarios. And this is resource number 2 that's on the agenda if you want to pull it up on your Chromebook. So the first one that's on there is if we say that there's going to be no increase in state aid, meaning that the per pupil aid that the state pays out is going to stay exactly the same as it is this year. And we're going to just take our current enrollment and we're just going to roll it forward for next year. We're not planning on getting any more kids coming back, regardless of what the circumstances are next year with COVID-19 and all of that. If you would look at this, the budget reduction number that would probably be a conversation piece would be somewhere around that $600,000 number. So we would be projecting right now, rolling all of our costs forward, taking no state aid increase, and planning to the exact same number of kids as we have this year. That would create a $573,320 deficit.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So those 38 kids who were down in enrollment, do you have a sense of like what percent do you feel will come back? I mean, granted, some will move, some things happen, but the kids that genuinely it's a COVID issue, do you have an idea, like in your gut, or is that not a fair question to ask?
I would say, looking at that, I would say it's somewhere between 20 and 23 is the number that I think is reasonable to say they will come back.
That they will out of that, okay.
Now, I could be proved completely wrong,
I was just curious, like if you would, yeah. like just-
but I think that's a ballpark.
Okay.
Okay? So this is the most conservative estimate in front of you. So if we go to the next page,
so if we could go to that page, so 2021, where would we be on our projected reserve that we wanna hold? We must be pretty close there.
yeah, so that fund balance policy is right around 1.6 million.
Okay,
Okay?
based on Total revenue?
12.5%. What?
Based on total revenue.
Correct.
So, gotcha.
Yep.
But if the revenue goes down, then that number goes down.
Yeah,
So if we go from a 9 point whatever and we drop it into a,
right, but this is also, it's 12.5% off of total revenue. This is just general fund revenue.
okay,
So we still, I mean, our total budget for the district is about $14 million annually. So,
so technically, if we went just the way we're going right now and took the 392 loss or deficit for this year, we would be above that number.
correct.
If we don't gain it back, then we're gonna drop below.
Correct. Yes, so right now, financially, the district could absorb everything that is going on right now with revenue loss based on COVID-19 and students not in school. We could absorb that and still be within our fund balance policy expectations. It would just be really important to make sure that we then have a balanced budget for 2021, which is, in my mind, very doable. Okay? So let's go on to the next one. So the next one now, if you listen to the governor's budget, his budget for the first year of the biennium had a 1% increase in the state formula. In the second year of the biennium had a 2% increase. Now, there are some other things that are in play as well that I think would actually drive revenue up a little bit. An example of that is there's a bill right now for transportation sparsity revenue that Paynesville would actually qualify for because we actually expend more money in transportation than when they had a set aside transportation formula. We spend more than what that formula provides us, so we qualify for transportation sparsity revenue. That would also go up as well. But this will give you a snapshot. If we have a 1% funding increase and we keep current students as to where we're at, you can see that you're looking at about $510,000 in deficit. Okay? If we go, now we start talking about the scenarios, students coming back. And this is the question is, you know, what do you budget as far as students coming back? That's the $1 million question. So this is just somewhere in the middle. Let's say we end up with 930 students next year rather than that 894. And we get the 1% increase that's in the governor's budget. You can see once those students start coming back, how quickly that impacts that difference. Now, all of a sudden, that difference has shrunk to $203,000 rather than being up in that 500,000 number. Okay? And then if you go to the last one, and this one now is taking a 2% increase on the funding formula. I really, Carrie and I worked on this. You can see it was at the end of November when we were working on it. So this was before the governor's budget was really released. I think knowing that, you could even take this one off the list because if the governor's not even asking for 2%, I don't think it's gonna end up happening. Although I did just read, I think today, the House introduced a K-12 bill that had a 2% formula increase in both years of the biennium. So who knows? Maybe that might gain some traction. But again, you can see if there's 2% increase with the same ADMs, you're looking at $451,896 in deficit. So realistically, I think what is gonna end up happening, and we are meeting as an admin group tomorrow, but I think what the board will probably see come the end of the month is probably something with a 1% formula increase and somewhere around 900 to 910 students is probably what will be the parameters that will probably come back and say, okay, board, this is what we would like you to set the budget reduction number at. And that will probably be the scenario that we'll be coming back with. Okay?
So realistically, just in general, we're probably looking at trying to make the deficit in that couple $100,000 range. based upon these numbers for next year?
Yeah, I think to be fair, I think you guys should prepare to be setting a number somewhere around 400 to 450. And I think that's gonna be reasonable, and I think it's gonna be doable. And I think there'll be ways then that we can even have some discussion as we get more information as to what the legislature's gonna do. We'll be able to have some discussion if we wanna modify that. What would be really nice is if, one, we could just get some of this conversation about our district gonna be able to use 1920 student counts. If that conversation could just be had at the Capitol and a decision made, even if they vote it down, at least it's information we know and it's something that gives us some certainty as far as what to plan for. That would be really, really helpful.
But historically, they don't get it done till the last minute.
Historically, K-12, yes, is always one of the last pieces, but I do think there is some momentum to have some of this conversation about this one-time exemption with.
So we can
K-12.
manage through this possibly.
Exactly. Okay, so then let's talk about COVID relief funds, because I think that's another question that maybe is out there. And people are saying, well, hold on, there's COVID relief funds. Why would a school district be to reduce anything? So out of the COVID relief fund, well, first of all, let's take a step back. Our budget in general, about 72 cents on the dollar goes to pay a person. Roughly. Out of all of the COVID relief funds that we have received, there was about $80,000 total that we could actually use for wages. That's it. So the COVID relief funds have really been put in place for schools to be able to have purchase equipment to meet health and safety standards. It's putting pieces of purchase equipment to be able to deliver instruction remotely. It's being able to keep up with sanitary wipes and face masks and shields and all of these other PPE pieces that are part of what the mitigation strategies are. There has been really selective dollars that have been able to be used for personnel. Our personnel dollars have been used in order to bring a full-time teacher on to work with kids from families that have selected remote learning. That is where our dollars that we can use for wages. There was also some additional funds out of that money that we set aside because we had the COVID sick leave requirement that was in place from September 1 through December 31st. We also set some money aside to be able to pay those 10 days of sick leave that all employees got, but there's no revenue for us. It had to be paid leave, but there was no revenue source coming in for it. So we did set some of those aside for that. So I think that's the other important piece to this conversation is while yes, there have been stimulus dollars that have directly impacted K-12, the idea that districts, one, still have these because we had to spend the money by December 31st of 2020. Now granted, there's a second round coming that we haven't received any funds for yet. It's supposed to be coming though. But the previous stimulus dollars, those very small portions of them were available to actually spend on personnel and they had to be spent by December 31st. So I know it's confusing and it can create confusion, but that is where things are at. There's just not a tool or a mechanism to say, just use your stimulus dollars in order to be able to not have to make any budget reductions moving forward. That everybody would be doing that if we could, but that's not how the rules are.
So when you're asking for a little bit of time, because of this moving so much, you're gonna meet with that admin team. About May, we have to kind of start to solidify this, don't we?
Well.
Or is it April?
It's gotta be before that because by April 1, if there's even the potential that we may have to lay off a teacher that has continuing contract status, we need to be able to get that.
So we would
process.
need that by April 1, which means that we're not gonna have any data specifically, unless for some reason they have a miracle at the state. Okay, I got you. So,
But I need you guys to set that benchmark at the end of February.
Yeah.
And we can agree that it's gonna be a little more fluid this year than it probably has been in any past year. But you still need to set it in February, because then that gives us March to get the process going so that we can clearly identify if we have to go down the road of unrequested leave of absence. And none of those timelines are changing due to COVID. All of the personnel statute that
I just
we're,
didn't remember what the dates were.
yeah, so none of that stuff, we aren't getting any flexibility with that.
Yeah,
So unfortunately, we still have those timelines that are in statute that we need to be able to hit.
gotcha.
But if we were to get to that point and realize that we're $100,000 over, keeping us to the 12.5%. So we make some decisions that this has to have, or the administration makes some decisions. But then that can be reversed down the road if we find out that, no, we're not gonna be behind. or-
Yep, so let's just play this scenario out, and I think this is what you're talking about, but by June 30th, you guys have to have a budget approved by state law, okay? So June 30th rolls around, and let's say there's a July special session to get the budget done at the state, and that happens sometime in July. Come August, this board could go and make a modification to their 2021 budget. But we need to have a preliminary budget approved. by
That's right. And if you give someone, tell someone that, you know, we're gonna have to cut here,
Yep,
but they could be brought back.
sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you can. I just think the only downfall to that, Rick, and you probably know this, is as soon as somebody gets the message of there's a good
Right.
chance you're gonna be
Right.
cut, they're looking for other employment, and it gets tricky then, because then by August, most of them have found other
Right.
employment, and
Yeah.
then we're searching.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
We really don't have a ton of choice in that. We have to manage for the budget that we believe is gonna happen based upon a whole bunch of stuff that could come from the state, but we don't know if it's gonna come from the state, and we won't know till the last minute, and we have no idea what the enrollment's gonna be when we sign everybody.
like I said, there's a lot
Yeah,
more
it's-
moving parts this year than there have been in the past.
Yeah.
And so,
We've kind of been here before, but it's not been to this degree.
Right.
Where we knew we had an issue coming up, but we didn't know where it was at, and so we just had to adjust through the following year the best we could.
So, just know that, you know, we're gonna keep moving forward with this.
Yeah.
At the end of February, there will be a recommendation to set what that revenue or expenditure reduction should be. And then we'll keep working through the process. But, as we get more clarity, we may be back having conversation about wanting to take a left turn and rethink our strategy that we thought we were gonna implement, so.
Well, I like your projections. So at least we have an idea what's out there, even though it's kind of pie in the sky, at least it gives us an idea of what's going on.
The other two things that are in there for resources, I just wanted the board to be aware of them. They actually just came out here a week and a half or so ago. So Governor Walz' Due North Plan, that's his education agenda. And there was a press conference and there's been articles in the paper about it. And then the 80-20-10, I know it's a large document, it's an 85-page PDF. So this is actually a report from a school finance committee that they were charged with getting together to come up to make recommendations for legislatures and the Department of Ed and the governor's office as to how to fix some of the funding issues that are growing in Minnesota. Clearly, a lot of these are metro versus rural issues. A lot of them are small school versus large school issues. And a lot of them create unintended equity issues. To give you an example, if you took our current operating levy and went to see what percent of property taxes we had to go ask for an increase to get the same buying power as a Wayzata, Minnetonka, or Eden Prairie, it would be an enormous ask for our community with the tax load. So the only thing that is the common denominator there is because of location and because of tax base, there's a funding equity issue in Minnesota. So this group worked on issues like that. And they came up with, I believe it was 46 recommendations. Originally, the committee was talking about paring them down to maybe, let's just take our top 10 or our top 15. The group said, nope, all 46 of them are really what we need to have an equitable system in Minnesota. So that's what that 85-page document is. Realistically, if that document were enacted as how we fund schools, with nothing changing in Paynesville, we would see about a $1,300 per pupil increase in K-12 revenue for Paynesville area schools. It would be a significant dollar amount. Obviously, nobody thinks that all 46 of these things are gonna be implemented, but just know those are the conversations that are going on. So it's not something you need to read cover to cover, but if you're curious about funding issues, equity issues, and financing K-12 schools in Minnesota, it would be a good thing to take a look at and do a little bit of reading in.
There were a lot of similarities between this and C,
Yes,
which was very interesting to me, that it would come through a committee. And a lot of what the C group has been talking about was, I didn't read the whole thing, but I read enough of it to get a feel for it. It was surprised me, actually.
I was looking for the clip notes, but
Well, it was nice they summarized
They did,
like
yeah,
some of the
at the end.
basic stuff,
Yeah.
like.
I went right to the end.
good strategy, Rick, good strategy.
I do think people should, our community should read it because it does lay out that, like how we've gone from 70% to 53% in funding. That's why we have to have operating, like, I don't know, it's really eye-opening to see how we have fell behind in supporting our schools, like tremendously. We're talking like margins of 20+%. I mean, it's.
And the other thing that this group, I mean, if you remember the Jesse Ventura years, his whole philosophy about K-12 is he was gonna eliminate all of these equity issues based on zip code or where a student's from, because the state was gonna fund K-12 education. And I think when he got to office, I think the state actually funded it like at 90 or 93% of every dollar that went out for K-12 was state. It completely wiped out all of these local pressures. Worked great right up until the first economic blip, and there was a little bit of a recession. And then the state's tax collections weren't what they were. And so then the first thing that happened was, well, now look at the size of the budget that K-12 is. We're just gonna borrow from K-12, withhold payments from K-12 in order to kind of bankroll some other things.
It's a funny mess.
And so it's interesting though, because now this committee went through kind of the whole pendulum swing where the state was really dependent on local operating referendums. Then Ventura's administration came in and said, nope, this is a state responsibility, and it worked well for a little bit. And now though, like you're talking about, Maggie, now the pendulum is swinging back where the state isn't able to fund what they want. And so now the local tax bases are being asked to pick it back up. So I think this was just an interesting time for this group to be working, because all of that pendulum swinging has all a recent memory, and people have all can remember and apply that. So when you have a chance, read through it. It would be very interesting if there could be a way that it would gain more traction, but time
Do you
will
think
tell.
it will gain traction?
I think components of it certainly will. Do I think that all 46 recommendations? No, I don't think they ever will. But the reality is, and Minnesota's not alone, but if we can't figure out how we're gonna fund special education services, that is, to me, has to be the number one priority. Because those are increasing at such a rate, it's almost like medical inflation, that we just can't, we can't keep up.
Right, and it seems like it's impacting the lower kind of socioeconomical districts. They're having a higher increase in special education, which is coming out of general fund because the mandates aren't, you know what I mean? So it's like this double impact on real schools.
Requirements.
It just like keeps compounding on these rural districts and.
Okay? should we go on to the facilities, Thomas?
Yes, that's
Okay,
fun.
all right, let's go with item C. So we're gonna take these just in order of the resources that are on here. So the project drawing is first, and I guess I will kind of let Maggie and Thomas and Cheryl chime into this, but I think this is kind of ultimately, there's no real timeline right now established as far as how this is gonna get done or when. But I think this drawing that is in here is ultimately kind of what the group has indicated is what we're looking for. And you can see the component is obviously the softball fields would be flipped. Rather than having those home plates in the northwest and northeast corner of our property, now they would be at the middle, just north of the track. We'd be talking about the blue rectangle would be an entry to our complex. There would be concessions in there, ticketing, could be used for track, it could be used for football, it could be used for softball. It would really be for all activities. And then from there, you would either go to the softball complex or you would head over to the track and football field. I don't know if the three of you want to add anything to just kind of that general outline, or if there's questions about that.
Okay. We'll start with questions, I guess, and maybe.
Yeah, just,
answer.
I have a really general one. Do you have a different, like, I can't read anything on here. Is that just mine? If I try and,
And you try like use your fingers and scroll.
if I try and zoom in, it's just blurry. Is that just me?
Scroll back out and then use the button at the bottom of the screen just to zoom in.
Okay.
Yeah, just hit the plus button down and then put your cursor at the bottom of the screen and
Yeah.
you should get a magnifying glass to come up and hit the plus
Click
button.
on that, we'll zoom in a little bit.
Rick, did you have something?
Yeah,
What?
and I don't know if there's any way of getting around this, but we're trying to figure out where the new pack ends up.
Yep.
So the parking is gonna be quite a ways away from the entrance here. In a sense, is there handicap parking outside so that people can actually get up close if they are?
So on that map where you see kind of that hashed,
Right,
half circle piece, so that's old curb,
okay,
that is gone now.
okay,
So all of that, line along that, where that old curb is, that's all parking along there. And then on the opposite side of that, that would be, right up next to the pack.
Right.
That's gonna have parking along there as well.
okay,
And then obviously the north lot would be the biggest lot. And then there would also still be parking at the south lot. I would think that regardless of when we're having activities, so the path right now that goes between football and baseball, that goes into our south parking lot. When we are having activities, whether it be football or track, people would be able to park in either lot.
that was another question I had, if there would still be an availability, because that's a lot of parking you get in there, and that's a lot, I think it's closer, but, that would
Yeah,
be.
so we would still use the north and south lot. There would still be an entrance to any of these activities through the path that leads up to the baseball field. You would still use that south entrance is kind of what we call
I
it.
would just hope that there would be something would designate an area for senior parking.
Yep.
So that our senior folks would be welcome to come up, and Thomas would drive in early and get a spot so that he.
Absolutely.
Oh, come on.
So if you park in the north or south lot for a football game, where are you going for your tickets? Same place as it always was, the ticket?
Yeah, so if, like, for instance, for a football game, there would be tickets at the south entrance off of the south lot, just like there is now.
Yeah.
And then there would be tickets at the north entrance, just like there is now too. There'd be tickets in both locations.
My question might be a little weird. I'm not a big baseball fan, but in the bottom right field for the girls, so we're setting it up to play softball, generally late afternoon, while the sun is setting. For those students, when I look at that field, that means if there's any kind of pop fly, those kids are looking at the sun. Does anybody take that into account?
For which one?
The bottom
The
right,
JV field,
The
The JV.
be the
yeah,
center field, right fielders would be looking into the sun, but I guess my only comment towards that is, I don't think you find that in a perfect situation anywhere in our baseball field, our catcher's looking, gonna be looking into the sun at some point in time, or I think that's just a factor of baseball, softball that
the baseball works.
around all the time for all the players.
Yeah, the baseball works, cause, if you have a pop fly coming out, they're looking north and east generally,
Yeah,
right? Well, for those kids, they're gonna be in there and, that ball comes up in the air and they're looking at the sun. I was just curious. It would seem to me, I like the design of the top one. It's a little bit like putting the windows on the north side of the big community center. Sun's not gonna be a problem there.
but there's not a lot of, I guess, efficient options to turn both softball fields to make a perfect situation in all cases. Because otherwise you'd be, having the use of the grandstands, the bleachers back to back, essentially, having those home plates in that same position is just typical. If you go to a lot of youth softball complex or baseball complex around many communities, there's 4 baseball fields or softball fields with a center hub.
Right.
And that's just how it's played, and those baseball games are played morning, afternoons, evenings, and
In the morning.
there's no way of making a perfect
Gonna have a
situation.
problem.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I guess so I met with the Baseball Association to go over this, and the first thing that I said is, so if we're hosting a Little League tournament, we're probably gonna use these 2 softball fields. And if you start playing Little League baseball tournaments at 10 in the morning, you're gonna run into the same issue on another field versus, and the Baseball Association just said, yeah, there's gonna be no way around that. They said, we run into that same thing when we host the Babe Ruth State Tournament here.
Yeah, you can't have it perfect.
They started games at
That's part of
10
the
in the
game.
morning and the right fielder, had some sun issues.
Actually, the way our softball diamonds are set out right now, we have the same issue.
It'd be wonderful.
The JV is still looking into the sun in the afternoon, so it's just,
That's-
it's gonna be about the same.
It's certainly a thought and a concept that is looked over but like I say, I've been to a lot of baseball stadiums and growing up through baseball, and there's just never a perfect situation.
It'll be interesting too, once we get the new addition all built, and how high that is, how much shade there is gonna be.
Yeah, how much earlier shade might come in across
When the sun gets lower, it's
Yep.
gonna be all in the shade quicker.
And the thing that too, he was saying is we don't have much space, like, because we had talked about, could we even push? Because ideally, the first scenario is we wanted that, like concession area to be where those bleachers are. There's just not enough space, so like they did what they could efficiency wise to fit those fields in, to be in closest proximity to the restrooms, concessions. Because we're just maxed on our space to a degree as well.
We could have shortened up the football field a little bit and made room for it.
We have 6 lanes in the track around the turns.
The best I could.
Another question I have is the old concession stand, is that just gonna be a storage area then? We're leaving that and?
Yeah, I would recommend right now that we leave it. I mean, there's obviously equipment being stored in the backside of that. I think we would continue to use that for storage, and it's not gonna sit empty, I can assure you of that.
A couple interesting things they brought up is our soil samples came back and they were pretty positive, so we have good drainage, so we'll be able to save some money probably when it comes to our drainage.
Guys didn't know we have sandy soil here, so.
Yep, so they could really tweak where, some of those, I guess, pipes go for the drainage, which was something really positive that came out of that. And I think you said the engineering of the building is looking at a different structure.
Yep.
I just like, everything's compact, everything's right here, whatever you're doing. Just,
So the other piece, and Maggie alluded to this, but the other piece to this was, I did have a meeting with BCI, and I visited with them about the actual building. So essentially that blue square it's 2 rectangles. The rectangles are 20 by 30, and then they share big awning is what the roof is. And so, my thought was, and I think the group was in agreement with this, is it would be nice if we could get that structure to match the, gymnasium, the community center structure as well. So BCI, actually, I met with them, late last week, and they are going, and they're gonna just, go talk with the pre-engineered steel, contractor that sold them the building here, and, get the same paneling on the outside, get the same windows, get the same everything, and get me a price for what that structure would look like if we had two pre-engineered 20 by 30 steel buildings with one shared roof on the top of them on a cement slab. And so I think it would tie in really nicely
I think so too.
if it matched the other structure that's already up.
Would they be considered the same brickwork and everything as well?
Yeah, so they do the same, the 4 foot or 6 foot, however tall that brick is on the bottom. They would do that all the way around. I think they were gonna, depending on, they wanted to get something to scale on a diagram to see if they wanted to do some corners, like they did the corners on. They thought, since it's only 20 wide,
That's, look kind of
Might
funny.
be too much.
it might look a little goofy, but they wanted to get it on a screen to look at it. But for sure, they were gonna wrap both buildings with the same brick.
I think maybe they could put just a single accent pillar on both sides.
Right.
For again, a little signage or something.
Yep.
Background.
The other thing you were looking at is potentially having a class construct the press box versus, because that was an expensive part of the project, is to have someone else do that.
Yeah, so putting that press box, so on the varsity field, which would be the west field, the JV field would be the east field. The west field then would have a bleacher system with a canopy over it. And then it would also have a platform at the back of the top of the bleachers where you could actually purchase a, kind of like a plug and play press box. Literally, they would crane it up there. It plugs into the electrical, fitting. You plug your internet connection in, and it's a plug and play system. It's a little expensive to buy it. It's obviously all built off site. I realistically think we could actually have students here construct that press box and have them be able to. We would still need to get some help to get it hoisted up there and fastened and everything, but I do think that's something that we could do in-house. It would still take the same engineering and stuff for the steel beams to support it, the same footings and cement work would still need to be designed to have that press box up there and stuff, so some of that cost would be the same, but we would save a significant amount if we constructed that ourselves. Dugouts would all be block construction on cement pad, and then all the dugouts would have an 8x8 storage on the end of them. The two dugouts there that are next to each other, so the one that's on the varsity field on the first baseline and on the JV field on the third baseline, those would also be powered. So if you wanted to use a pitching machine at practice, you would just need to run the extension cord from the dugout out to the mound. You wouldn't need to have a generator or anything like that, but there would be power to both of those. And then there'd be batting cages that would also double as bullpens as well. And the one thing that this diagram is missing is both of those fields would have scoreboards. So we would relocate both of our scoreboards that we currently have. The scoreboard is just showing up on the varsity field, but there would also be a scoreboard on the other one.
Yeah, it's coming from myself, looking at the field and as we've gone through our meetings and whatnot, it's come into play really well. We've asked a lot of questions, we've kind of challenged them in a lot of different ways and certain things that we're seeing and certain things that we had thought we might be able to get, and I think it's come to a good picture to be able to supply the complex as a whole with something bigger and greater, but then primarily to improve those softball fields and get something you know, that we can be proud of on that end of things, and that end of the complex as well.
Any other questions with it?
The dugouts are gonna be ground level?
Yep.
Ridiculous question, then how can you call them a dugout?
Yes. I'm with you. All right, can we go on to the next, the timelines?
Yeah.
So, we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting as well. Obviously, Neil is going to finish the design work and stuff for track and softball. That is, the priority, and so he's gonna get that, taken care of. The only thing he's really, waiting for is to hear about that pre-engineered, component of that building. Otherwise, he's pretty much, ready to go. First priority, I think we need to go and circle back and take care of the indoor air quality project at the elementary school. There are gonna be some funds left over from the current project. Those need to be earmarked for that indoor air quality project. So I think that's the first order of business. I've engaged Site Logic on that. They did work. I believe it was Jake and Cheryl and Thomas were the three that were working on that. I'm gonna meet with Site Logic tomorrow to go over budget stuff as far as the project. And then the next step is to get Site Logic out here and to get the three of you together and just revisit where we left off. I would like to see that indoor air quality project bid out yet this spring. We'll see if that can happen. That timeline might be tight, but we'll see on that. It'd be great to get that indoor air quality project going this summer, be able to get a chunk of that done. We did talk a little bit about it at our admin meeting. And it might be a challenge to do indoor air quality project for that entire building all at once, just because of the amount of use that building gets in the summer. So maybe the other thing we have to explore a little bit would be doing and taking a phased approach with it, and maybe do the east wing one summer and then circle back and do the west wing the second summer or something. But that'll be more question for Site Logic to work out the details of that than I think we have to worry about right now. August of 21, obviously the facility project here will be completed. I would recommend that the board do their work this winter and spring to set up a November 21st operating referendum renewal or updating. We do not need to go out this November. We would need to go out the November of 22, and we would need to get something passed, or we would be losing funding once taxes payable 23 start getting collected if we don't get something passed. We would be good for taxes payable 23 and be taxes payable 24 is when we would run into that. So we can go out starting in November of 21. I would suggest that we take care of that. Then that winter, finalize the track and softball complex stuff. And then we would be looking at the summer of 22 is when we would start taking up the track and softball complex project. So realistically, I know there's some conversation, a lot of conversation about potentially doing this summer. And realistically, I think priority 1, indoor air quality project, priority 2, operating referendum, priority 3 is that facility piece, which would mean that would be summer of 22 timeline is kind of what it kind of looks like. Questions on that timeline?
My question is, I go back to the softball park, it was a big thing to get that in place. We have since added the track and a whole bunch of other stuff to this thing. But at the same time, the hope was that we would get something done for those girls like as quick as we could. If we did the softball complex by itself, how much of that money do we have? We've been saving money for it, haven't we?
I think
Softball, no, we have $1 million of LTFM available, and really what that's available for is to replace the track. So softball itself, no, there's not, I mean, we don't have.
We have no
dollars.
money set aside for the girls.
Well, there's roughly about $200,000 set aside in that designated for facilities account. But there is not the total dollars to do the entire softball project aren't sitting available. And part of the problem with that is to do that softball project, there's limited ways in which we can fund it. For instance, like when your track is at the end of life, you can replace your track with long-term facility maintenance dollars.
Gotcha.
Well, you
It's
can't,
not at the end of life.
you can't technically flip your softball fields and then put in new dugouts and a new plaza and all of that with long-term facility maintenance, because you're not just repairing or repurposing, you're actually building new and it doesn't all meet the definition of long-term facility.
I think we talked about it as well, and brought to attention, and, brought up that doing all the projects at once as well is gonna be more efficient with our dollars spent versus having crews come in now, doing a part of a job and then having them come in a year from now and bid a separate part of a
Well,
job.
that case applies to everything.
Yeah,
Doesn't make any difference what project.
and so if it means moving up and doing the softball complex this summer just to do that, and then looking at the track and everything else next year, is that really efficient use of our dollars at that point in time?
Because we're talking like $200,000
Yeah.
by doing things, and if we do something now and then decide we are gonna do turf or something that impacts how we're gonna do all the infrastructure, so, and you're gonna go over that, but it's like, it's so intertwined. I mean, that's one thing I think personally in that committee I've struggled the most was just trying to figure out what comes first to make sure we're being most efficient with our dollars, because it's so intertwined, that project.
Yeah, depending on what we do, if you look at it,
Right.
we can save money by doing things at the same time.
Right.
And doing,
Get to 50,000, 100,000.
Exactly, and it starts adding up to be.
and ensuring we do it right. We don't wanna put a wood floor down when we're gonna tile it later. Let's make sure we're gonna do it right and just do it the best way that we can for that money.
Ashley?
What percentage of the baseball field did the school pay for?
What percentage of the baseball
Was that all
stadium?
the school?
We didn't.
No, I don't think,
$25,000, I believe we stuck into that whole baseball field.
yeah.
Running costs we have, but about $25,000. It was nominal.
And the rest was,
Donated.
Big FEMA grant and then local donation.
yeah, okay. That wasn't considered an upgrade.
I think it would be considered an upgrade.
I mean, it wasn't considered, like, long-term, like you said.
No, the district didn't use long-term facility maintenance
Yeah.
dollars for anything, no.
And that came from the baseball association. I mean, they're the ones that pushed that. It wasn't,
Yeah.
we went out and said, we need to do this. They wanted to do it, so. And there is some money possibly available here on some of these projects
Yeah.
from our community.
Any other questions as far as timeline? Okay, can we just talk a little bit about this turf then? So, couple things with this. Some things have changed a little bit. The first thing is, again, I did meet with the Baseball Association, just to talk more about this. I showed them the layout. They absolutely have funds available to assist with the softball, component of getting those fields flipped, getting that building, put up, dugouts, you name it. There's dollars available there, and so I think, I can continue to clarify exactly what that looks like. The Baseball Association has received a fair amount of pushback, from the state amateur baseball board as far as the possibility of hosting, a state, amateur state tournament if we had a turf infield and a grass outfield. And basically, the answer they've received is no, that the amateur board would not be interested in having that tournament played on a facility like that, unless there were 2 other fields in the area that we could partner with, so we had 3 sites that were all identical. So given that information, the Baseball Association has basically just said, you know what, we appreciate the thought, but we would prefer just to keep our grass infield as it is. And so the conversation about doing any turf at that baseball field is dead. That is not going to move forward in any way. So that's where that's at. So when you look at this, and if you had a chance to go through this, you know, when you start talking about why are we having this conversation about turf exploration, both Maggie and Thomas have alluded to this. Right now, we have a football field that needs to be repaired. It has a significant divot in the one side of the field, and if you are on it, you can see exactly where that is. So at the minimum, it needs to for sure be, the grass needs to come off, it needs to be recrowned, and it would need to be resodded and a new surface put down. Obviously, the softball piece, there's improvements that need to happen there. And then now also is a good time to explore it because we do have some community donations that we believe would help offset some of the costs of this as well. So when you look at this and people, you know, always want to compare, well, what does it cost as far as our football field now? There aren't any costs associated with it. Why would we want to, you know, spend the dollars that would be required for a synthetic surface? We've got a grass one that really doesn't cost us anything. This is a very conservative estimate of what we have into our football field on an annual basis. Is that at a minimum, it's about $16,000. A couple of these things are a little difficult to calculate out because our irrigation system, any of the troubleshooting, repairs, any of that is happening with that is happening with volunteer labor, meaning we don't pay any labor bills. All that we really have into any of our irrigation systems are materials, and so that makes it a little difficult to estimate what that would look like. When you look at as far as our athletic field labor, you know, just to give the board an idea, we have pretty much one custodian that spends 3 days a week on that field, from August 1 until November 1. So once we're in activity mode and we have high school football and junior high football going, that we pretty much have 3 out of 5 work days each week. A custodian is dedicated to making sure that surface is striped, it's mowed, it's playable, it's ready to go. And then you have, you know, we've estimated as to outside of that time, you have May 1. I assume there are probably years where maybe if you get a really nice spring, you're actually needing to maintain it before May 1st. You might have to mow it a couple times or something. So when you factor all that in, again, a very conservative estimate to this is roughly $10,000 is what we have in labor for it. You add in what we have for fertilizer and killing weeds. Again, a lot of that is donated. Most of this is just materials that we are purchasing to apply to the field. And then you also have the field paint that we are using on that field as well. All told, it comes to about $16,000 a year. A couple other things that need to probably be factored into that as well is if you would go down the road where you're gonna go with a turf surface, then you also are gonna have impacts in other areas because now all of our junior high football games are gonna be on that field. All of our JV games, our C-squad games, varsity games, everything would be moved to that field. So there's gonna be a ripple effect of some other spaces that we are maintaining in order to be able to have competitions on, that right now, we would need to maintain them to the level of having competition. So I believe this is a conservative estimate, but it just gives you an idea that the idea that we have a grass field and it doesn't cost us anything, that is not necessarily the accurate description of it. There's neighboring districts. It's interesting. I have several colleagues, none of them are these districts, but just superintendents that I frequently will ask questions to. Just about all of them now are either have turf football fields or in the process of doing them. And the people that have put them in, I have called and asked, hey, I got a football field that I need to get recrowned and I need to get repaired. You guys got anybody you've worked with in the past, who would you recommend? To a person, almost always the first thing that's out of their mouth is, why would you go and spend the money to do that? Why wouldn't you just put turf down? And so it's striking to me that everybody that is in that process, that's the conversation that is going on. I've not come across anybody yet who has got buyer's remorse or, is wondering, why did we ever make that decision? That's just not the feedback that I'm getting. Life expectancy, Sauk Center alludes to it in their comments here. I know when turf fields were going in, 8, 9, 10 years ago, I think there's a lot of places that were saying that they would get 8 to 10 years of useful life out of them. The surfaces that are out there now, they're talking about 12 years of useful life. Neil, who has been out working with us, they've got a field down in Hopkins that's on its same set of turf for, I think, going on like 19 or 20 years now. So obviously the products are changing and the life expectancy is changing as the products do as well. So when you start looking at this estimated project cost, you can see that when you start talking about the timing of this and how do you actually put together kind of a scope of how we would accomplish this, they are all very much interconnected because there is a certain value. For instance, if we're gonna go and put in a new track, that really is the time, since our football field is in the condition it is, to make the decision whether we're going to go to the synthetic turf surface or if we're going to just go recrown and sod. Because there is significant savings in both projects if you can pair them together and just do them as a project, rather than doing a track in, say, the summer of 22, and then 2 years later say, no, we put in the curb and gutter, so it's ready for turf. Now we're gonna come back 2 years later and do the turf. You really would be money ahead if you just paired the two together and went forward at the same time. When you're talking about synthetic turf install, that is a different price than replacement. So essentially what you're talking about when you're looking at install prices, roughly 50% of the cost is what you see in the product that gets played on that top surface. And then 50% of the cost is everything that's underneath. Obviously, whenever that turf is met its life expectancy and it needs to be replaced, it's running about 50% of what your install cost was. You're just peeling up the carpet, you're putting the carpet down.
Are you on 6?
I'm on 6, yep.
Okay, can I ask a question here?
Yep.
So when I look at the construction of underground infrastructure, then I was looking at the other sheet where we talked about what it would cost to recrown and sod the field.
Yep.
With no irrigation at 80,000. It's hard to believe that's 80,000 is correct, but this technically would be 420 if it was done in a project, because you have the discount on the far end. There must be more to this that we would have to do in the crowning of the existing field. Or is this an adequate comparison to say the recrown and sod the football field with irrigation is 80,000, but to get it ready for the synthetic surface, we have 420. It would seem like that spread might not be there.
Yeah, I think
It
realistically.
probably wasn't a comparison when we put this all together.
I think realistically, when you're talking about recrown and sod, you're looking at probably $100,000, what you're probably looking at.
Or maybe more,
I
or,
think 100 is a decent number.
okay, so that makes this project 320 over the top of that you never have to touch again. Right, cause it's gonna be underneath the surface, and if you have to replace the turf, you never have to touch that again.
Correct.
That's what the goal is.
Correct. Yes.
Can I ask another question?
Yep.
So what is the G-Max and ICA shock absorbent pad? Is that a pad that goes under the field,
Yes.
in addition to the rubber that's in the?
Yep.
In the,
Would you
okay,
like to
Think of
see
like
one?
a pad underneath your carpet.
okay.
Would you like to see one?
It would be interesting to see what it looks like, but
Give me one.
the ones I saw when we were at St. Ben's, it had 5-inch blades of glass and they had a simulated grass with 3 inches of the rubber packing in there. I always thought that was the total absorption.
They use-
And like they were saying, a little more upfront, but the longevity of that pad.
The longevity of your
Is-
turf is better
if
with the
you
pad.
Right.
This is the one Neil would recommend putting in.
Okay,
This is also an option as to.
I gotcha.
You can pass them around if you want. Yeah, and when you're talking about whether you're gonna play soccer or football, there really is no decision, do we put a pad in or not? The pad has to go in, for either of those, situations.
and presently, there might be stuff happening on our grass field that we're not letting take place that could be on there. Because we have to have the grass prepared when they get there in the fall. Is that
Pretty
correct?
much nothing. can
There is
take place.
nothing.
Nothing.
There is nothing that happens.
Not even gym class, I don't think can happen out there.
Yeah.
There is nothing literally that happens from, for sure, August 1st until November 1st. Well, until for the week after MEA, for sure that window, there's nothing that goes.
And then at that point, it's pretty much winter and nothing happens until spring at best.
So did they have the G-Max at St. Ben's? Do we know that?
I could find out if we want, if we need it. I don't know offhand.
We were curious, because that's the university spending piles of money. It'd be interesting if they don't have it and they're counting on the rubber. Well,
Are you asking about that, installing that G-Max and
Yeah.
absorption pad? I can tell you
They
Minnewaska, NLS, and
all have it?
Center in Alexandria, all of them have put it in. St. Cloud State has it. Any place that they are going to play football or soccer on.
then I would assume that they had it. It just never came up when we were there.
They will have some sort of pad. Or this one, this is cheaper than this one, but
And we'll still have that couple inches of rubber inside the blades.
yeah, so they have a fill, and it depends on what product you go with for actual turf, determines what that fill product is. So for instance, let's just say that there's gonna be a turf infield on our softball field. That actual fill that would go there is actually a little bit spendier of a product. But the reason it's spendier is because when you hit a grounder on that field, you don't want that spray to come up when somebody goes to field the softball. And so they use a little different product that is a little more dense, that's a little heavier, that isn't gonna create that spray
Yep.
situation. Versus when you watch a football game and somebody drags their toe on the sideline, you see the black thing pop up.
Yep.
They don't want that on a softball, or a baseball field.
The other thing you talked about was if you were to recrown it and do grass, so it's not only the drainage part, but the grade is higher. So if we would decide to do turf later on, not only, you're having to remove dirt now too. So there's a lot of components that go into it. It's not just that field is now recrowned and you can put turf over it.
Take it all
So now
back.
removing all the dirt that you just brought in to.
I think
recrown it.
he used the comparison like when they repave or re-cement the freeway or the interstate. That's like a certain grade. That would be like putting a grass sod field in. Whereas if you go and put turf in, the grade that they're putting in is like 0.5%. is what the center of that field is higher than the very outside. It's close to flat. When you're on the surface, you can see there's a little crown to it, but it's virtually flat.
Maybe you were just asking about it for other uses. It says football and soccer. Do we currently play soccer here at all?
No,
But the plan would be that we could and we'd still use the, whatever those other soccer fields are
No.
called.
Camping Park or whatever.
That has nothing to do with the school.
So school has.
No, it doesn't,
has no
but-
Soccer.
That's a soccer park that,
So if we were to put turf on our football field, I would suggest and recommend that we stripe it for soccer as well. And the only reason I would suggest that is, I do think that there would be opportunities for us to be able to host, rent out our facility, to be able to, host, some of those section events as well. And I think that youth soccer club would be interested in potentially using that space as well. So then moving to slide 7, you could eliminate that because that's where we're talking about the baseball infield synthetic turf piece, and that is off the table. And when you're looking at the track component, one of the things that the number on here is gonna move a little bit because of the second line item and I'm on slide 8. But you're talking about that construction of interior stormwater collection system. He has a $200,000 system. That was pre-soil boring samples. And so originally they were thinking they were gonna put a rather significant retention, underground retention space right underneath the football field in order to hold that water long enough to send it to the city storm system at the right rate. But with our soil borings and stuff, he thinks that actually isn't something we would need. Typically on that inside perimeter of the track, when they put that curb and gutter in, they usually, I think, have a 4-inch pipe that runs around the interior of that. And then they have that pipe connected to this retention system. And what Neil is talking about after doing the soil borings is rather than doing a 4-inch pipe, to actually just do a 12-inch pipe all the way around. And that would get us enough holding capacity that between that and our sandy soils, that he would be able to get the system to feed into the city system at the right rate. So that number is gonna move a little bit on that slide. So, you know, when you look at slide 9 and you just look at the programming opportunities, again, these are just the experiences from some other districts. I think you heard Matt talking today about the stuff that they're planning for the community center. And I really do think that if you had a surface that we could use all the time, I think the possibilities really are probably pretty endless with that. So these are just some of the lists that Matt and Max were talking about, but by no means is it meant to be an exhaustive list. So
I have another question.
Yeah.
Get there?
Yeah.
What's a synthetic track? How is it made? We right now had tar with a surface over the top. Well, what's a synthetic track? Is that really a dumb question? I
No,
don't know what one is.
this is how they're in.
We have samples of that too.
And that goes on a prepared surface underneath.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
interesting. So you don't have a 2-inch layer of asphalt underneath this thing anymore to crack up.
yes, you
There
do.
is
There's
concrete.
still asphalt underneath.
Yes.
Also, it's asphalt or concrete?
Concrete.
Asphalt.
Asphalt.
For asphalt, because that's part of the issue of the timeline is.
Yeah, so when you look at the projected timelines on this, that's the one why my question mark is there. So essentially, that is the track surface. It's a polyurethane surface that they come out and pour, and then it needs to cure. And they do it in multiple layers, and then they get to that top part that has the texture. They go in, once they're ready for it, they just spread that. And as it cures, that top layer actually melts into the surface to become part of the actual product. But that then rests, or it adheres to asphalt base. And the
So if
problem
we look at
is,
our asphalt with our freeze thaw cycles and all that, where are we at there?
yeah, so Neil would be recommending that we take all of our asphalt that is there underneath our current track out. That we take that out and we put in a new asphalt base. But then the issue with it becomes
Thank you.
that asphalt base has to sit there and oxidize for 30 to 60 days. Because if you don't let that petroleum leach out, that thing's gonna initially adhere to it, but as that petroleum starts to leach out, you're gonna create bubbles where it's not gonna stick anymore. And so that's where this timeline question comes, is in Minnesota, you can't pour that surface once evening temperatures get below 50 degrees overnight. And so then the question's gonna be, do you try to get started on this project in April when you wanna do the track to be able to make sure it's done and you can pour that in August? Or do you wanna get your track season done and then start in June? But then what you're risking is if you get a cold October, you might not get your track surface on in next spring. You might still not have your track surface on until it warms up enough where they can do that. So that's where the two timelines are up for discussion, because.
So just as a reasonable person, asphalt in this country doesn't always work well. We look at all the new highways go in with all this massive money we spend. A few years later, it's starting to crack up already. So how do we handle the cracks underneath this thing? Or are they saying we're gonna put a tar surface down that's never gonna crack?
I've not heard anybody say we're gonna put a tar surface down that's not gonna crack.
So there must be a way to
replacement.
fix it.
So I think the reality is, at least in our climate, that's why track life expectancies are about 20 years. Because this product, you're gonna be able to go on and repair this product after year 10, and then put a new top layer down, and then you're gonna get 20 years for sure out of this product. But the reality is you're right, as that asphalt starts to degenerate and freeze thaw, it is gonna.
But isn't this pretty standard? I feel like every high school I go to has this now.
They either have this, or there is a model of this that actually is less expensive on the install. The problem is it's more expensive once you go to that, I believe it's like 7 years in, you have to do a rehab on it. It's more expensive and you have to do those rehabs more frequently. Where
You wouldn't
this,
be able to tell from looking at it, but
right, this one's a little more expensive up front.
Yeah.
But you're gonna get 20 years out of it, and you know you just have the one rehab cycle that you're gonna have to worry about.
and pretty much the asphalt is the best. They know what to do anyway.
I mean, I can ask Neil if they're putting tracks on concrete I'm not, I mean, I would think that Neil would have brought that up or would have.
I can't imagine that your concrete subbase is gonna be any better on a freeze-thaw cycle than your asphalt. If anything, your asphalt's got more flexibility to it, and you're not driving, 2-ton vehicles over it every day, all day, and
It's not gonna have water on it. You're not gonna have freezing and cracks and making them worse.
salt.
I was just curious.
Salt and everything else that goes over asphalt that causes our roads to deteriorate so much faster. Whereas underneath the track surface, it's certainly gonna be more protected.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. But I don't know what to tell
Yeah,
you.
maybe, I'm just curious. I didn't actually know what it was. I must not be paying attention, I guess.
Next time you're out there running around the track, take
If I can make it around.
The other thing he talked about too was that, I mean, what was similar to this facility project is, you're looking anywhere from a 5 to 10% increase in costs every year as a delay. And I think he was saying that in the past, these contractors could like secure the price of oil that goes into this, and they can't anymore just because that fluctuates so much. So there's some variable too that we're not gonna be able to control, but every year that this passes, you're looking 5 to 10% more than the year prior. Is that fair in kind of what he was saying, or?
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of the, you know, some of the price of the other product and material might be coming down. We might be getting extended use of life, and so there might be some things that cancel a little bit of that out. But it's just like anything else. If you think that you can do something cheaper 5 years from now than you can today, I don't.
In my whole life, I've not seen anything go down from one year to another, so part of that conversation for me is mute.
Yeah.
Because it's a reality, doesn't make any difference what you do, it's gonna cost more if you kick the can down the road, but nothing to do about it, cause that's the way it is.
So that's just kind of in a nutshell, the turf piece.
Maybe you said that but the track includes the long jump and the pole vault.
Correct.
and all that.
I didn't say that, but thank you for bringing that up. That includes in our discus area right now is in bad shape. So that would include updating that to something that meets the standard and everything. It includes high jump, it includes long jump, the pole vault area, you got it. Discus, the discus area on that layout would actually be, it's in the same space as our current discus, or not discus, shot put, I'm sorry. The shot put ring. Instead of, right now, we just have, I believe it's one platform on our shot put area. This would actually be big enough where there'd be 3 throwing circles on the same slab. And then the middle one is what we would use for competitions, but at practice, you would be able to have 3 shot putters practicing and using the area at the same time versus right now, we just have, I believe it's the one.
And the long jump and the triple jump was gonna be set up a little different, wasn't it? Was there a two-way or something?
Yeah.
They were gonna do it.
Okay? Other questions? So the one thing that I'm going to reach out to Neil for is, since we know that the baseball field and baseball association is a done conversation, I actually want to reach out to Neil and see what the cost would be to turf the infields on both softball fields. To have the JV and varsity field both have turf infields. And just have Neil kind of update the documents he's given us with that. Not saying that that's a direction that we need to or must go, but I just wanna reach out and then get that piece from him to be able to play around with that as well.
And that's kind of just been like central is like, now is the time to look at it.
Right.
So I think it's important, like, we're not saying we're doing that, but if we're gonna ever do it, we need to look at it now.
It makes more sense rather than putting down
Right.
the field and then tearing it up and putting turf in later, if we decide that's what we want to do.
I always have to bend a little bit on the lifetimes, cause like our roofs we put on are supposed to be 20 years roof. And we still have them on here for 27, 28 years, yep, we need to replace it, and, you know, we still go through that same thing, so sometimes when I look at a turf for the rest of this, and like you said, they have a field down in Minneapolis that's 19 years, well, the plastic and how the, ultraviolet rays are handled, all that's changing, so
Well, I think.
it could mean it lasts a lot longer, and that is just a benefit for cost.
I think the other thing too, that you have to, I mean, the sun obviously is the one thing that is hardest on these surfaces when you're talking about synthetic surface. And so I do think there's some discussion and conversation to be had. There are parts of our country, 300+ days of sunshine a year. That is not what Minnesota experiences. So I think there's that piece of this as well that factors in, as to longevity as well, so. Okay,
All right,
can we squeeze David in here?
yeah, yep. Welcome, David. How'd the game go?
Right here?
Yeah. I won't bite.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, well, I just have just a few updates, just some things going on. We're working on the registration guide right now and hoping to finalize that in the next probably 10 days. We have added some really cool classes. We are looking at some hybrid classes, offering some hybrid classes, our 0-hour classes, expanding some of our college in the schools programs, and also some of the online classes at Central Lakes College. So a lot of neat things going on. We're just kind of working through what that's going to look like. Next week we have Sweet Fest, and we have our coronation on February 17th, which is Wednesday. We've had the middle school students back for a couple weeks now, and that has gone really well. We added a lunch, so 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade each have their own lunch right now, and that's been working really well. And just really excited to have our 9th graders back next week. Any questions for me about anything? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess I have a question. I don't know if it's you or not, but, did we have a little bit of discussion on keeping the 4 days with the Fridays, still at home?
So we are talking about doing some things with our 2021 calendar.
So we couldn't,
That would have some different pieces and really incorporating what those middle school and high school kids were saying when they came to talk in December about personalizing and being able to do some things that way. But as far as right now, our school calendar for this year wasn't built that way. So unless we're gonna just keep kids in hybrid mode for the rest of the school year and have them here 4 days a week, that really isn't
Option.
an option. And the other thing too is it's going to be very difficult to have everybody pre-K through 12 in that 4-day-a-week hybrid model, particularly for the impacts with transportation. It's really gonna be a squeeze to be able to implement all the mitigation stuff that's associated with hybrid learning with having all students on that 4-day calendar. So. But there's groups of both buildings that are talking about that very thing of what that calendar might look like come next year. I know you'll hear more about that in the coming, at the coming meetings.
Yeah, I've had parents on both sides ask me, some Fridays, no kids in school is a problem, and some, it's a great thing, so.
Right.
Just wondering if that discussion was going anywhere for the rest of this year for full in school, in person would include Fridays, not.
When we go back to in-person learning model, that'll be 5 days a week, Monday through Friday.
Okay. This year.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Anything else? All right, on to the strategic plan then. So the strategic plan that's in front of you, there's nothing changed from this from the last meeting. Everything is the same. We just need to work through what this group wants to do with tweaking this. And then we'll look at getting this on a agenda for an action item at the end of the month. So I'm thinking that we can start with going through this spreadsheet. I did send out 2 of these today, so I hope you have the one that has more yellow on it than the first one. For simplicity's sake, can I just start going through the green stuff? I think they're more technical in nature, and as far as I'm concerned, I think we can just say, yep, we're gonna do those.
Thank you.
And then I think really the conversation is about more the yellow COVID items.
Yep.
Okay, so, moving down on the
I
green.
feel like these are all just my questions in green, so if nobody else has questions on what these mean, it's probably just because I'm dumb and.
No.
Well,
Nope. Let's go through these. So strategies and tactics, goal 1, strategy 1, action step C. what do connect time and SEL mean? I actually appreciate the comment because the one thing that I noticed as I was reading it over then is there's lots of acronyms that we just have to be more specific to spell out. And so we'll do that. We'll fix that and put those so that they're more specifically spelled out. Connect time is something that the high school is gonna be implementing. It'll be 30 minutes daily next year, where students are actually gonna be able to schedule, it's more of this personalization piece, but they're gonna be able to schedule their time. So if they potentially need some assistance in math class, it would give them an opportunity to be able to go and maybe potentially work in a small group or individually with their math instructor. So it's gonna be really geared towards building in purposeful time where kids can try to get their needs met based on their unique circumstance. SEL, that stands for social emotional learning, is what SEL stands for. Learner empowerment. When we're talking about empowered learners, we're talking about students that are intrinsically engaged in school. It's that old concept of rather than just doing school because that's what I was told to do. It's actually developing something at school that engages kids. It's those kids that I hear about occasionally that want mom or dad to drop them off at school early because they've got something they want to get going on or they're connected to something and they want to be here. It's those kids that are starting a duck call company in Tracy Piefenberg's classroom. And they're here for 6 hours on Fridays to try to get duck calls produced. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about student empowerment. It's their agency, their voice, and they're really connected to a piece where they're owning what it is that they're learning. PLCs is professional learning communities. That is a process by which districts will offer professional development for faculty and staff. And then strategy 3 for goal 1. Create and implement local emotional and physical wellness standards, activities, and evaluation tools. Yeah, that's the cool part is we're actually gonna develop our own. So we're going to come up with what we want our own emotional and physical wellness standards to be in Paynesville. And then once we have those, we're going to actually go down the process of working with an outside agency who's gonna work with us to develop tools that we can actually use to measure student and staff growth in those areas. And so, yeah, I'll be honest with you, that part of this whole thing is what I'm most excited about, is actually trying to come up with ways to measure critical thinking, measure creativity, and measure those things that schools like to talk about, but they don't really have any real quantitative data to share with people. To me, that's the exciting part about this is gonna pave the way for us to get that conversation going and get started down that road.
I even like the physical wellness standard because I feel like I was in school, they had the presidential, I don't know, do they still do the presidential physical fitness or whatever in elementary school, but then it kind of drops off and they're, I think physical health is important, but how do you set a standard for that for everybody? It's maybe easier in elementary school, but everyone's at such different health levels and.
Absolutely, but I think there's tools that we can, I think there's things out there that we can do and again, it goes back to that road about really trying to personalize student experience.
Yeah, I like it.
So, goal 2, communication is key. This was just a statement that's on there. I think the statement rings true. And so I don't know that this was ever like a clarification of let's add something, but I took it more of a, let's just remember this is fundamental for communication. Under number 2 for communication, would it be helpful to add and inform after engage? When I look at that, yes, I think that's absolutely something that can add. It makes perfect sense. And then underneath goal 2, again, there's a reference to parents in goal 2, and we should probably change that to families or add guardians. I think again that is something that absolutely we can do. And then there was a question regarding goal 3. There's a statement that says reinvent service delivery models. This means thinking acting outside the typical classroom box, correct? And the answer to that is yes, that's exactly what it is. How can we reinvent how we're gonna deliver services that are either the most efficient or most engaging services for kids? Okay, so I think all of those in green, as far as I'm concerned, I'm gonna just make those changes. Okay, so then let's go back and let's talk about the yellow. Let's first talk about the mission statement. So, and Rick, I think it was your emails that.
I love mission statements. I've worked on mission statements so many times and yeah.
We're doing that at my church. The problem is people get so bogged down in mission statements, it can't be overly complicated.
Well,
You know.
there's two kinds of mission statements, good ones and bad ones.
Exactly,
Bad
exactly.
ones are the ones that get thrown in the drawer and never seen again. The good ones are the ones that everybody knows, and you can walk down the hallway and say to a staff person, what's our mission statement? And they'll tell you.
Right.
And you've got it on your wall someplace and people see it. I want to make sure if we're gonna have a mission statement, that we use it.
So to clarify, because, and Rick picked up on this originally, and I did already make this change, it's on page 2. So our mission statement as is right now is really, our mission is to prepare students with academic, social, and personal skills to be career, college, and community ready. Then I had added the purpose of this purpose has been characterized by stakeholders as, and then that was feedback I got from community sessions, from staff sessions. So Rick, to your point, I think you're right. Just get that away from that first sentence. The actual mission statement itself is that our mission is to prepare, okay? So then let's talk about mission statement. Rick, I agree with you. I think if it's something that the clearer and shorter, the better. It's gonna be something that is going to stick. But then there were also some other questions, so I guess let's open up the conversation about mission statement and where does the board feel they wanna go with this?
I agree with Rick. I mean, I think something simplistic that people can actually feel that they can achieve and remember. I think that's pretty important. I mean, we don't want it in a drawer somewhere.
I mean, I like the one that somebody rewrote. I don't know who did that, but I really like it. But it's 2 sentences and it goes long.
Yeah, makes it short.
It
And if we
is.
say, all of you are gonna have to memorize this.
Right. And I think part of that was where the original conversation came up is, do we remove the word college?
Right.
Which so that's where I was like, well, if we're removing it because we don't want people to feel they have to go to college, why don't we just add in the word military? So it's a career, college, military, and community ready versus changing it. But if we needed to change the whole thing, that's where I came with the proposal. How do we then change it? Because I personally am not in favor of removing the word college. I think we're an institution for learning, and to remove it, I guess I really want to understand more about that. If it was the equity of people going to military, then let's add military.
The military is already community and career and sometimes college. I don't think it's
You know,
necessary.
But I think the
Or college,
only notion
maybe
we
higher ed or something else.
discussed about with college is to be career ready is based off of what you're finishing your education with. Whether you're finishing education with high school and you're gonna go work at the local body shop to learn the skills and become an automotive technician, or you're gonna leave high school and go to be a doctor, well, it clearly involves college. I'm not partial one way or the other. I think that was that notion of you could remove college because becoming career ready goes to the level of whatever it takes for you education wise to become career ready. And that may be 1 year of college, 2 years of college, 8 years of college, no years of college. You're gonna become career ready at that point in time. So I think that was, I guess, how I took the conversation when we had it a month ago.
Yeah, and I guess my thought, and I don't care, if we leave college in there, it's not gonna,
Yeah,
but to me, it's kind of redundant. Career ready has several pathways,
Yeah.
one of which is college. So why do we pick out just college to emphasize and not the other pathways?
Yeah.
But if we emphasize all the different pathways, then we get a mission statement that gets very long.
I wouldn't have walked in here agreeing with that, but now that you guys say it, I think removing college actually makes a lot of sense. And I'm pro college, but I'm also pro whatever,
But the student path
whatever your path is that you
Right.
need to do. And I think the idea of college, I mean, even for all of us are old enough that the idea of college is different now. And kids that are graduating now, college functions in a totally, and I think it's evolving really fast. I mean,
The future of college will change
the future of
drastically.
college is
It's the next
changing
step, yeah.
at this moment.
It's
Yeah,
Interesting,
so.
because Saturday night, 3 of our kids were home and their spouses were there, and we got into this discussion. Because they're all 20 years off from what, and they all said, you know, boy, we just felt like we had to go to college.
Yeah.
Because of us, the parents, not just
Right.
because of school.
Yeah.
That, we never had a choice, and I had five kids, and 4 of them graduated from college, 1 went 6 years, never graduated, and he never should have gone.
Right.
And I feel bad now that at that time I didn't see that. So I guess a part of me says, because we had this discussion several years ago, that sometimes in the schools, there tends to be that push that
You have to
you
go to
have to
college.
get career ready, or you have to get college ready.
It is college ready.
Right, and I didn't look at it as a negative, and trust me, whatever the board decides, I'm gonna go with, I'm not gonna live or die on this by any means, that's not what I'm trying to say. But I have used this mission statement in conversations with other people that talk about, we wanna make sure that we're honoring all students, and how I took it was, and how I interpreted it was, for those who wanna go directly into a career, we're honoring them just as much as you're honoring somebody who's choosing to go into a path of a next education step. Just as much as people maybe aren't even gonna enter a career, they're going into community right away, because not everybody is able to work for a lot of reasons. So I looked at it as a spectrum of, we're trying to make sure that there's representation, so no matter what your pathway is, that there's a place for you here, and we're creating these pathways. That was just my interpretation, but if we all know that, you know, career is, you know, then what's the difference between career and community, right? You know, or you know
But
what I mean?
that's
So
just
I-
it though, is I think career speaks to what you're going to
Right.
do. You know, and community is who you are and your engagement with those
Right.
With those
around you.
regardless of what you do.
Right, and I think Thomas is exactly right that career for a doctor is gonna just, it's
Naturally
superfluous to say
required.
college.
Right.
It's gonna require college.
But I'm
And I like that it's all C's because then you can remember it easy, but if you
It
lose
was,
one of them.
it was like, I could just say like, here's kind of, so I'm totally fine with removing it, I don't want it to.
And I'm totally fine with keeping it. I
Right.
think it's a good board decision. I love the discussion right now. I think it's what makes us the board.
I just didn't want it, I felt like the initial, like we were removing it because we didn't wanna make people feel bad if they weren't going in that direction. I'm like, but we do actually measure, and we do look out and report out how many students don't we to college? How
Yeah, I
many
mean,
go to the
it's
military?
certainly
So I'm like, I just don't want it to be like, you know, now we're gonna say nothing because we don't want to like talk about pathways.
I do think there is a value in having the efficiency of a mission statement. And as the discussion goes about how college is implied in a lot of career decisions,
Mhm.
I could see not having the word college in there. I think you're still communicating the same mission,
Right,
whether the word college is in that statement or whether the word college is
Right.
out of that statement.
I think it implies that there are a lot of pathways to be chosen.
Right.
It's not as structured as saying you have to go to college.
Well, when the college is,
And there are a lot of different pathways. You don't have to go to college, but you do need something.
And as we've discovered this year, especially even K-12 is not just about academics, you know? And college kind of implies just the academics, whereas career kind of summarizes more of the
Right.
skills, and then community more the socio-emotional and things that you
As
need.
Thomas said,
So I vote for Nick in college, that's just my vote.
it's implied that if you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be going to college.
right.
And if
And I'm, like I said, I'm fine with that. It was more of like, I didn't want it to be removed because, like, we don't wanna say like,
Yep.
kids are going to college, like,
Yep.
if we meet it and that's the intent behind it,
Could it
I'm
be changed to something
favor.
where about?
I'm in favor of the college. Cause I look at college a lot different. We went into discussion of college being a doctor. Okay, their whole doctorate took place after what we would formally consider a college anyway, right? But there's 2-year colleges, which we used to call vocational schools. Minnesota School of Business, not necessarily a college, but it's continuous, organized education of some sort. I think it narrows it down. If you get your statement to where you aren't somewhat suggestive, you're not really saying anything. So then where is that point where you get there, where you have this mission statement that is absolutely word perfect, doesn't say anything about college, and everybody gonna look at it and say, did they miss college in there? I mean, it's not that you have to go.
Yeah.
We say that if they wanna go to a career, that's fine. If they wanna learn from a career, that's fine. If it's a 2-year college or a 4-year college, but to narrow it down to the thought pattern of a doctor, I think is not really what we're talking about here.
But
How many people we know got college?
narrow it down to a doctor, narrow it down to a teacher, narrow it down to, you have to go to college. Whatever career path you choose either drives you to the path of college or not. However, I agree with that statement, Bruce, of the level of being suggestive. We remove college, are we no longer being suggestive that that's, a goal, an opportunity, a direction a child should be choosing as well? So, that statement by itself, holds a lot.
And it's similar, like the recommended one, which I know we're not going to agree with, and I don't intend it, but the reason why I wrote that sentence was to try to address more holistically that we're talking about that lifelong learning, that's kind of what we're trying to encompass, I think, by the word career then. It's that lifelong, that's part of the community.
And I don't think career here means job. I mean,
Right.
necessarily, if you wanna be a homemaker, stay at home,
Right.
not,
But most people are probably gonna think career
It's a job.
means job, and so that's
but
why,
that's why
Right.
it's,
A homemaker is a job.
it is a career, it's just a non-paid career.
and I didn't mean it that way, I'm just saying, I think people will often equate, like you're saying, career means like,
But part of it too is that if we're really advocating for student-led learning and student engagement, then part of our job is to encourage students to find out what path is gonna be the path for them for the career that they desire.
100%.
Return on investment, and, we've had talks about the values of a 4-year liberal arts or humanities degree, and they should know, they should be getting that information in high school so that they're not trying to make that decision 2 years into a 4-year college or something.
were you gonna say something about?
Well, we've used the word pathway the most out of any word so far tonight when we're talking about this.
So maybe-
Could there be something in there about preparing kids for their
Yeah, I like that.
career pathway? And not, then you're not singling out a certain area, but the whole goal is to give students experience in different pathways and set them free, and so could that be something? I mean, every one of us has used the word pathway tonight, and when we're talking and having this conversation, could that somehow be incorporated in there? And then it eliminates the narrowness of it. Just a thought.
I do like adding the word pathway, because I think that kind of encompasses all of it, like it's saying, because what's the point? We're trying to prepare students, right? So that they are ready for the 21st century, that they can go and succeed whatever that pathway might be. But then there's also that community component of, like you were saying, the character, the integrity, the person as, who they are. That might cover it and we keep talking about pathways, so I do like how we could infuse that word.
I'm looking at it now and I'm beginning to really.
Now, here's where you can.
Skills to be career ready. I'll bet 90% of the kids who graduate from high school are not career ready because they're gonna change their career. I went to college and changed my career 3 times before I got out of college.
But you're looking at a career then as a very tactical.
Right, yeah,
Versus
yeah.
saying the critical thinker or critical, like, it's not about necessarily.
And the average person 10 years ago was, I think, 6 different careers. I mean, it's not like it was when my parents were, and then you pick something and you're a salesman for the rest of your entire life,
I just think the word maybe has changed, because when I think back years ago, my dad had a career. I knew exactly what that was. He did it for the rest of his life. That was his.
But that's why I
That was his
don't,
job.
to me at least, I think pathways would be superfluous. I mean, I think career encompasses that already, that it's like your trajectory. you know, I don't know, it's your pathway. It's like the same word, it's redundant.
Job specific. College, maybe a little more open-ended, community ready is part of it there. If you just nix that whole thing and say, prepare them for their pathway of their choosing or whatever.
Well,
But
yeah.
I don't think it hurts to have something in there as kind of what our intent is.
Or what if it's like preparing students with academic, social, and personal skills to meet the needs of the 21st century? Because then we're not defining what that pathway is. We're saying we're preparing them right now, that if somebody graduates from here, my hope is that they can enter whichever phase, or not phase, at whatever path they want to go in. We want them prepared for the 21st century, whatever that may mean to them. Maybe we don't have to define it, and we leave it more open.
And so the beautiful thing about a work session is you guys don't make any decisions.
So you say, let's move it up, move it along.
That's the beautiful thing. So I think I have a snippet of the conversation and
You can come
the
back.
flavor of this. What I would like to do is tomorrow our admin team is going to meet, and I think our admin team can come up with a
Thank you.
a statement that encompasses this conversation, because I think we understand what everybody is worried about. what everybody-
Pressure's on you, Bree.
We want something.
And Rick, that still means you're gonna work on this
We want to see.
I love working.
emailing me some missions.
I like just making yours and just making it. I got yours down to 17 words.
Can I send you lots of stuff?
Send those my way, Rick. Okay, let's go to goal one then. So when I'm getting this feedback, it seems to me like what we really need to do is just have a little bit more of a conversation about what the board feels, the statement and the topic of equity. Yes, that is the one common theme with just about all of the stuff associated with goal one. So I guess that's my question, is if you guys could just have some conversation about what you would like to see equity to mean in our strategic plan, then I think, again, we can go and start crafting how that's gonna be constructed in there to be able to meet that expectation.
And one of kind of my comments was, for me, it's challenging to have equity as a standalone word, because what does equity mean if you don't add in diversity and inclusion? And part of that is you can say, we have access to all these students, right? So we bring in students and maybe they have different learning abilities, whatever it may be. But if we're not providing the resources to make sure that they are included, you know, that next step, it's easy to say things are equitable. Oh, you can do it, you have access. And I think that's where a lot of places fall short, is like, it's our responsibility to go beyond that goal. And so that's where I have a challenge with, so I think it's important we should define and clarify, what does equity mean? Because I don't want a school where we just have equitable without, we're making sure that there's inclusion.
Has everyone
That's
seen the
where-
illustration with the baseball fence
Yeah.
with the different height people, and we hand out equal boxes, one to each, and that's not the same as equity, which would be making sure the person that's the little short person gets what they need to see the game. But I think, I really kind of hate that illustration, because I think it ignores the fact that, you know, it's not about handing out equal resources in equitable ways. I think, like, fences don't look like that. They look like this. And it's more about us figuring out how to fix the fence, the problem at the base, like you say, than making sure you.
Right. That's where I think, personally, that's where I think there's some danger, because it's easy to be
Yeah.
like, we have an equitable system.
Right.
But, I mean, our state law says we should have equitable funding, and look at what happened.
Right.
Not saying we would do that, but it's just. that's what-
Mine was more of a general, why does each one say equity when shouldn't that be then in just number one in growth? Can we just include equity in the Cause obviously it's important for each of A, B, and C, all of the wellness areas, we wanna make sure are equitable. And then we have, I mean, it doesn't make sense to keep adding it as a standalone. I mean, it should be, growth will be measured through a holistic,
Oh, I see what you're saying, like putting it up there.
equitable.
Equitable growth.
In an equitable,
I don't know how you measure
Yeah.
equitable.
that might be a good way to approach it.
I mean, that should be part of our growth strategic goals anyway.
Okay,
I'm lost in this one, actually, I gotta be honest with you. I read goal 1, where it says strategic goals. I go to the top of the next page, and equity isn't in goal 1. It's in subcategories. So where do we start the limitation of subcategories? Am I missing something? So where does it say in goal 1, without the subcategories, anything about equity? I'm not seeing it.
That's what I think what Ashley
Exactly.
was saying, move it up.
And equity it should be in that goal
Yeah.
one, not as a
Yeah.
category of goal one.
So you're saying you want the equity in the goal?
yep, yep,
I think that solves a lot of.
that solves a lot of it.
I think.
Okay,
Yes.
yep, we can incorporate that. And then let's talk about, vision. There's questions well, let's go back to goal 1. Anything else in there? When I was putting this stuff in, it really seemed to me like there was a lot of uncertainty and question around the equity piece. And I think we have a solution for that, but is there anything else that,
There was just a couple points, and again, doesn't need to be included, but where I had questions is like in the emotional and physical wellness. Like, would it be important to add support network there, if I'm understand this correctly, but that more I see is like, there's 2 different types, like this would be more about individual support network, like we know that we don't have resources necessarily for that individual. And then the social wellness where it's listed there, is that more about our community as a network? So one seems more,
yeah, so okay, thank you for bringing that up. So when I saw that, I really looked at in the emotional and physical wellness sector, I really see resiliency as encompassing
okay,
that support network.
okay,
Because resiliency is all about dealing with the stress, the anxiety, and a natural piece of being resilient is also being able to identify that support network and reach out and use those supports in appropriate manners and stuff. So to me, it's a piece
okay.
of developing resilient kids. Okay? When we get down to the social wellness piece, when you're talking about a support network, I would absolutely agree with what you're talking about is, yes, that support network, it is tailored to an individual student, but it's a support network that may be present in the school system. It may be present in a family structure. It may be present in a community setting, or it could be present in all of those situations. It doesn't necessarily need to be just one location or 2 locations or 3. You know,
Okay,
that's the part of dealing with individuals. Everyone's unique. And where I may need 2 or 3 support networks, you may suffice with 1, and we both could be healthy, happy individuals.
and the other one I had is under social wellness, is like, would there be a place to add something around global citizenship and responsibility? And we're talking about relationships, mentorships, equity, like, we're really not having a goal about, kind of when we get to that community component of our mission, like, how does that tie in into these goals? And to me, that would be around responsibility and.
Does global mean outside of the school?
Like.
Or do you
that-
mean literally global? I mean, do you mean like your community, your state, your country?
Right, that we're expanding beyond.
Citizenship.
I think global is as simple as larger than oneself.
Yeah,
Okay,
And for someone at age appropriate, larger than oneself might mean it
The next
includes
classroom.
myself and my peers.
right,
And then it might be myself in my homeroom, and then it might be myself in my my school, and it might be myself and my community, or it could be.
Is that included under relationships, or is relationships not that vague? Relationships is a one-on-one and the other is you in relation to these peers. You know what I'm saying?
I see global citizenship as something different than relationship.
Okay,
You know,
so,
there are things that I need to do to be a good citizen in the community of Paynesville.
right,
That doesn't mean that I have to have strong, positive relationships with every community member of Paynesville.
right.
So I see them as separate.
Add that one,
So I would say we would add number 5, or we would add, and we would put global citizenship underneath the social wellness component.
And then be the right words you would want to choose, but I'm just trying to address like that
Right.
aspect of
Right.
it.
just when you say global citizenship, I think of like global politics and global issues, environmentalism or something, you know,
No.
but you just mean
Right.
outside of
Like to
your.
be a good citizen, to be a good
Yeah.
community member, so like
Right,
thinking
exactly.
and like Matt said, whatever stage that is appropriate, but to think, to
No,
get
I
our.
think that this needed that somewhere in here.
Okay? And then, Ashley, you had that question as far as vision.
I did.
So that last sentence, build the foundation of responsible, ethical, and compassionate.
Ashley's tired, she withdraws her question.
And really the question is really, you know, what does that entail?
Well, and that's exactly what I was trying to address, is this global citizenship kind of idea without having to say like, you should be an active member of your community without having to make money for your community or be, you know, be productive, but not necessarily in a financial way. Be involved, be active. Yeah, global citizen is a good way to.
And I think that last statement on there is really getting at the heart of that our hope and where we want to go is to develop well-rounded.
Right, right, and I think I was just wondering, because responsible, ethical, compassionate is, maybe the responsible is a little vague for me, because what's responsible? No, for me, it's not.
It is subjective.
It is subjective.
And I think it can be
Like-
subjective, it just be
Right.
left there. It'll be different things to different people, but
And it
I
should
don't-
be subjective.
I don't think we
That's the
should shy
point.
away from
Right.
saying, well.
It should be, though, I think that's part of where our pathways is, like, it's okay for people to be in disagreement, it's okay for there to be conflict, it's okay to have,
Right, but I mean,
and to have responsible,
you want involvement, you want.
right. But that comes with responsibility and learning, your responsibility, even if you disagree or even if you have conflict, what is your responsibility to be part of the community?
Great, what is that?
That's like,
That's my question.
Well, each person has to find their own level of responsibility.
right, it's
Some
gonna be
people might
different.
serve on the school board,
Yep.
which is kind of a crazy thing, but, and then somebody else might donate some food to the food shelf once in a
Right.
while, you know, so all kinds of ways that people might find it for themselves.
Or just.
But we're trying to help them get to the point where
What does that mean?
they have the skills to make those decisions.
The other thing that I had a comment on that didn't fall in here was, within the strategies and tactics, would it be important to actually, and I didn't think it was completely laid out, which element it's addressing? So you have all these different elements under each, like, goal, so that as you're going through it, like, because my hope would be that students, teachers, you know, staff, like, okay, so global citizenship, for example, where is that addressed, so that whatever curriculum or however that's being taught, like, it can be like, and then you can also balance like how much of it. So that would.
Like you're saying,
A recommendation.
what's in here directly show how it supports this.
Right, so these
Yes.
different elements like are somehow listed in what
And
you're
what's in
impacting.
strategies should directly support
So you
what's.
can point to like, here are the ways that we're,
It is a
you know,
for a
addressing
reason.
resilience through
Yes,
these.
yep. Okay. Anything else?
Really?
I'm excited to see some of these changes and just kinda have another look at that.
So we will, take this up at admin tomorrow and then, look for a copy to come out at the end of the week at board notes. Take a read on. Okay?
Last matter is, information roundtable. Anybody have anything in particular that they wanna make sure to bring up or talk about or look at? The only thing would just, my notes right now would just be, make sure we have naming of the facility is, we can,
Yeah.
look at next meeting, so we can have a vote on that and everybody in the community can understand the name of that facility, but, anybody else have?
I don't, but my husband just watched the girls' basketball and said, please tell the board, thank you for the coaching. And it's awesome game, so there you go. I said, I'm not gonna say that. He's like, say it's for me. Okay. There you go.
Alright,
Anything else?
that's everything, meeting
We're
adjourned.
done.
The order.